Samuel Rudolph Alexander.
And you go by Rudy.
Yes.
And tell us what your birthday is.
November 2nd, 1930.
Wow.
So just a few days ago, had the 88th birthday.
My gosh, congratulations.
Well, thank you.
Let's talk about where you were born and where you grew up.
I was born in Wayne County and grew up there. Attended Goldsboro High School, graduated in 1949. And during my high school years, after school each day, I worked at J.C. Penney Company and on Saturdays. And after finishing high school, I wasn't really sure whether I wanted to go to college or not. So I continued working at Penney's full time. They made me manager of the boys department.
Wow, so this was at the J.C. Penney store in Goldsboro?
In Goldsboro.
And where was it located at that time?
It was on Walnut Street.
Downtown?
Yes.
Wow. Now, you also had some other jobs. Did you grow up? Didn't you carry papers and do some other things?
Yes, when I was in the 5th grade, I started carrying papers, the Goldsboro News Argus.
My gosh, still today, printing?
Yes, and I had a paper route out in the country, so I pedaled a bike 10 miles a day in the afternoon, delivering 100 newspapers.
Oh my gosh.
Sometimes it would be 101, but basically 100. And in the beginning, I made $7.50 a week delivering papers, but later I made $12 a week, and I thought I was wealthy.
My gosh, that's wonderful. Well, so you graduated from high school and went to work as a manager of the boys department at J.C. Penney's in downtown Goldsboro.
I did. While I was carrying the papers, I had an uncle who encouraged me to save some of my money, so I did. And by the time I did go to college, I had enough to cover my first year of tuition and fees.
So this is about 1950.
Yes.
You've graduated from high school, you're working at Penney's, but you're now thinking that maybe you should go back to school.
Yes, after the summer and fall, over that period, I just wasn't satisfied and decided I would go to college. And the next question was, where shall I go? And since I did not like Spanish in high school, I said there must be a college I can get a degree from without having to take a foreign language. Now, I know that was foolish, but that was my thinking at the time. And East Carolina Teachers College, it was then, had such a program. And so I came down to Greenville and enrolled. And while I was here, I introduced myself at the local J.C. Penney store, and to make a story short, I got myself a job working at Penney's in the afternoons and on Saturdays. And so at the beginning of the winter quarter, I started my college studies and started working at J.C. Penney's.
East Carolina Teachers College.
East Carolina Teachers College. It, a couple of years later, became East Carolina College.
Okay.
But that's where I started. I started with a major in social studies, which was history, sociology, geography, and minored in English. And enjoyed history very much, and so by having the job at Penney's, they needed me to work summers, and so I went to school year-round. And in 3 years and 9 months, I had earned a bachelor's degree and a master's degree.
Now, even though World War II was over, we still had some military conflicts, and in fact, there was a draft going on, and you had a student deferment as a college student.
Yes, I did. My grades were good, and I was deferred. The Korean War started while I was in school, and I was certainly subject to the draft. I did not get in ROTC. I've always had a vision problem, and so as I said, I didn't get in ROTC, but I was able to finish school, and after doing so, I thought, I don't want to start a job and shortly thereafter get interrupted with military service. So I simply went to the draft board in Goldsboro and told them I appreciated the deferments, and if I was going to be called, I wanted to go ahead and go.
Well, let's go back and talk a little bit about your college days. Tell us what your Bachelor of Arts degree was in, and then also what your graduate degree is in.
The undergraduate degree, the major was social studies.
Right, so what you had talked about.
Minor in English, yes.
Yeah.
And the graduate degree was in education administration.
Now, you were also a pretty active student on campus. You were an organizer and have always been an organizer. Didn't you become involved and even maybe start some clubs and things while you were here?
I organized the College Republican Club. In those days, Republicans were as scarce as hen's teeth in Pitt County and eastern North Carolina. But it was always a lot of fun to kid with my buddies and the Young Democrats because we had more people attend our meetings than they did. But neither had a lot.
You also played in the band, didn't you?
Played in the band, played French horn in high school, and the band director, Herb Carter, found out, somebody told him I had played French horn, and he invited me to play in the band, and I did that for a couple of years. Wasn't very good at it, but they tolerated my being in the band, playing French horn. I had a lot of fun, and I was president of the student government one summer session and president of the International Relations Club. So yeah, I was involved, and I never missed a football or basketball game or a concert. Back then, East Carolina had a few concerts, fine arts concerts, once in a while a dance band, and so there was a program of activities at the college.
And were you, do you remember how many students attended East Carolina College at that time about, or how many were in your class? I haven't looked that up. But,
well, in the beginning, I would have to check, but it was certainly under 2,000.
Yeah,
about 16 or 1,700.
Yeah, pretty small.
Yeah.
Yeah. And who was the chancellor at that time?
Well, it was the president. Dr. Messick, John Messick was the president. Dr. Leo Jenkins was the dean of the college. And after Dr. Messick retired, Dr. Jenkins became the president. Later, when the university, when the statewide university system was formed and all the college presidents within the system were renamed chancellors. Jenkins became the chancellor.
Okay, okay. So you got your undergraduate degree, your graduate degree, and as you were saying a few minutes ago, you knew that you probably would be drafted, so you went to the draft board in Goldsboro, and tell us about that conversation.
Well, I just simply thanked them for the deferments that I had received and told them that if I was going to be called, I'd like to go and get it over with. Well, very soon I was called, and I went into active service on Pearl Harbor Day, December 7th, 1953.
Wow.
And I had a little bus ride from Goldsboro to Raleigh, and from Raleigh we were sent to Fort Jackson, South Carolina for processing, and then on to Camp Gordon, Georgia. It's now Fort Gordon, but it was Camp Gordon then, for basic training. And shortly after getting to Camp Gordon and training started, I thought to myself, how in the world could you have volunteered for this? But anyway, I lived through it, and after basic training and a short leave, a week or two, I don't remember exactly. After that, I was called to the signal school, or assigned, I guess would be a better term, assigned to the signal school for 6 months of training as a radio repairman.
So for those of us that might not know what the Signal Corps or the Signal School was it all about radio communications?
Yes, it was. Mm-hmm. Electronics were certainly simpler then, and they may have had, I'm sure, cryptography and some other things were involved, but this radio operation, radio installation, radio repair, to the best of my knowledge, and it's been a long time, but that's what the school was about.
So after you graduated from school and learned your trade for the military, where did you go next?
I was, instead of being sent to Korea, thank goodness, I was sent to Germany. Mm-hmm. And so I spent the balance of my military time in Darmstadt, Germany. And the 322nd Signal Battalion was located there, and that was my assignment.
Now, one of the things that I know about you is that you are, and we were talking a few minutes ago, through your life you've been an avid photographer. Did that interest start in college, high school, in the service, or was it later on?
It started while I was in Germany. I bought a German camera, certainly not a Leica, I couldn't afford one, but I bought a nice camera. And while I was there, I had 40 days leave altogether. And so I traveled in the Netherlands, all over West Germany, and France, and Switzerland and Italy, taking pictures. They were color slides, and believe it or not, those slides have lasted until recently, when I scanned them all and made digital photos out of them.
Wow.
And when I threw away all my slides, it was like throwing away part of myself, because they had meant so much to me.
Well, at least you preserved them and you have the photographs.
Yes, I now have them backed up on external hard drives and have edited them in Photoshop elements, so they're good pictures.
Wow.
The color is still there.
Great history. So you spend much of your service time in Germany. When did you get out of the service?
When I was released in late November 1955.
1955.
Yes. There was another thing. While I was in Germany, some engineers from Fort Monmouth came over to Darmstadt to teach us how to use new radio equipment. And I got acquainted with the fellows, and we seemed to enjoy working together. And after they finished our training, a few days later, I was down in the motor pool checking on some equipment in the truck that I had. Someone came down and said, the colonel, the battalion commander, wants to see you. And I thought, oh Lord, what have I done? But anyway, I reported to his office, and he informed me that those engineers had informed him that they would like to have me accompany them to Sculthorpe Air Force Base in England, where they were going to teach an Air Force communications squadron how to operate this new radio equipment. And I couldn't believe it. The colonel said, "Would you like to go?" And nobody in the military had ever asked me would I like anything. And so after stuttering and stammering a moment, I said, "Yes, sir." And so I was had orders cut to go with the engineers to England, and we were there working with an Air Force group for a couple of weeks. And we finished our work about a week before Christmas. Well, there were no flights back to Germany for us, so we simply went down to London. The Army put us up in a hotel, and we had a week in London.
Oh my gosh.
Spent Christmas there in 1944, and that was quite an experience. And
I bet it was 1954.
Well, that was 54. I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry. Thank you.
Well, I bet you had a great time.
Oh, I did. We got to tour the city some and see a Broadway-type show there, and it was quite an experience, and didn't have to spend my own money.
My gosh, what a treat. Well, you know, the other thing clearly that happened during this time is you developed quite a fondness for travel.
Yes, I did, and the bug bit, and I've been traveling since.
That's wonderful. Well, let's go to November 1955. You're released from the service. And what do? Do you come home?
Yes, I did. I was married, and I had my wife with me in a portion of the time I was in Germany. Had her come over. And after I got home, I looked into job possibilities, and the East Carolina Council Boy Scouts of America contacted me and offered me a position as a district scout executive. And I accepted their offer, which caused me to have to go to the professional training school in Mendham, New Jersey. And that was a 6 months training school. And I think it was the most intensive education I ever received. We went to class every day from 9 in the morning until 9 at night.
Really?
Of course, with lunch and dinner breaks and other breaks during the day. We did that 6 days a week, plus on Sunday from 1 o'clock until 9 at night. And in addition, we had homework.
Oh my gosh.
So we really covered in 6 months at least a year in graduate school. And the training was excellent we learned how to recruit and train volunteers, how to organize groups, and how to promote those programs and so forth. So it was excellent training.
Wow.
So after completing the school, then I was assigned to serve the areas of Carteret and Onslow counties. I lived in Jacksonville for a little over 3 years, and then the position opened in Greenville for serving Pitt County. Mm-hmm. And I was transferred to Greenville and served as a district executive for an additional 3.5 years. And while I was serving as a district executive in Greenville, the scout executive near the end informed me that our marketing, or rather our the field service director was taking a position at another council, and I would be promoted to that position at the end of the year. Well, In the meantime, I learned that a new position had been created at East Carolina College. And so a friend of mine who was in a administrative position at the college suggested that I apply for it, that he felt with my background and training that I would be a fit. So I came over to the campus. I got an appointment with Dr. Holt, who was the dean of the college at the time and was the person to see about the position. And I told him I was interested. We talked about it. I brought a copy of my records showing my academic and work activities. And he asked me he said, do you know Dr. Jenkins? I said, of course I do. He said, well, I think he's in his office. Why don't you go over and speak to him?
My gosh.
So I did. Dr. Jenkins knew me. And his secretary admitted me right into his office, and we had a chat. I told him what it was there for, and we talked about it a little bit and some other things. And finally he said to me, or he asked me, what are you going to do this afternoon? I said, I'm going to Raleigh to visit my sister's family, taking my family. He said, well, you go home and call me back in 30 minutes. So I called him back in 30 minutes, and he said, when do you want to come to work?
Oh my gosh.
So that was the way I was hired to serve as Assistant Dean of Student Affairs.
This was 1962.
1962. And
do you remember what your first day of work was?
Well, let me tell you, the job description included serving as an advisor to the Student Government Association, advisor to all of their programming committees, and to be in charge of the scheduling of all the program and activity areas on the campus, plus a number of things. Those were the major ones at the time.
Pretty important job.
Well, what they had done was pull things that a lot of other people were doing together and created this new position. And so on August the 10th of 1962, I began work. And it was the most important thing, in my opinion, to find out what the student leaders were doing and how they were doing those things before making any suggestions or anything about their programming. So I spent the next several weeks getting acquainted with the students. Some were there at the end of summer school, and then when fall quarter, we were on the quarter system, began, I certainly got acquainted with not only the student government leaders, but their program leaders, committee chairs and members as well. And I learned a lot about the activities that they were carrying on. Student government was in charge of all the programming on campus, any fine arts, any popular programs, films, lectures. And so there were committees for all of those activities. And so, as I said a moment ago, it was my job to serve as an advisor, to work with them. And I learned fairly quickly that although they were bringing to campus 3 or 4 fine arts concerts a year, they were handled individually. There was no series. They were not making really an effort to market those programs or concerts to the general public. And on campus, they were issuing free tickets to students, faculty, and staff. So if there was inclement weather, you could expect a lot of people not to show up.
Right.
So it was really not organized. And the same was true with some, popular attractions, dance bands, etc. So over the next few months, after I felt that we were working together well enough, I made some recommendations. I recommended that we start making a modest charge for admissions. $2 to students, $3 to faculty and staff, and $4 to the public. Those were just small amounts, but I told the students that in all probability, if individuals had made a financial investment, they would be more likely to come if there was a rain shower, or in the winter if a few snowflakes came.
Absolutely.
And I also suggested that we consider forming a series of the fine arts attractions and really market the series to not only the Greenville area, but the surrounding area. And to, of course, market on campus, but to try to earn enough revenue that we could enhance the modest budget that the committee had to work with in order to bring in more big name attractions and artists. And believe it or not, they accepted my recommendations. So that is where the Performing Arts Series began.
So do you recall what was actually the first year? Was it 63?
We got it really started to roll in 63. and 64. By then we had seen how things would work, and it really was underway.
Did you have some key attractions in those years?
Yes, we did. We booked, and again, I would have to check my records to see exactly. We booked violinist Isaac Stern.
Wow.
And the night of the concert, we had a Wright Auditorium basically filled, a large audience.
And that's where you had your performances,
Yes,
was
in
Wright
Auditorium.
in the center of campus.
Not the auditorium we have today. Back then, it was a multi-purpose building. They had portable or folding seats, wooden folding seats, and they cleared them out and played basketball there.
Oh my gosh.
And had other registration at the beginning of each quarter. And for concerts, put all these folding seats out and could seat, including the balcony, a couple of thousand people.
Wow.
Well, the night of Mr. Stern's concert, the first half just, I thought, was wonderful. And it was my practice to always go backstage at intermission and to check with the performer, the artist, to see if he or she had any special needs. And Mr. Stern was a nervous wreck. He said, there's a child sitting on the front row who is swinging his legs back and forth, keeping time with the music, and it's driving me to distraction. You've got to move them. I said, well, Mr. Stern, that's the family of the dean of our music school, and I would really have a difficult time to make them move. He said, well, you've just got to do it. So I went out and spoke to Tom Miller, who was dean of the ECU School of Music, and I said, Tom, we've got a real problem. I said, Mr. Stern is just a nervous wreck because your son is swinging his legs back and forth, keeping time to the music. So anyway, they moved. They graciously moved. I had one of the ushers get them good seats elsewhere. The auditorium was not totally filled. And we worked it all out, and Stern was happy, and the second half of the performance went off just fine.
It's a great story.
Another time, we had Duke Ellington booked, the Duke Ellington Orchestra.
Yeah, wow.
And I had student technicians to be at the auditorium to meet the orchestra when they arrived. And of course, about 6 o'clock, I went over. And the students were helping the orchestra members get all set up, and I didn't see Duke Ellington. So I walked over to one of the members of the orchestra and introduced myself, and I said, where is Mr. Ellington? He said, oh, he's flying in. I said, oh my Lord. Greenville at that time did not have any commercial airline service. And I just knew Ellington had flown to Greenville, South Carolina.
Oh my gosh.
So we continued to set up. We were going to try to make the best of a bad situation. And lo and behold, about 5 minutes before showtime, in walked Duke Ellington. And we had a great concert. But I learned that he had truly flown to Greenville, South Carolina.
Oh my gosh.
Got off the plane, got his bag and went out to the curb, hopped in a taxi cab and told the driver, take me to East Carolina College. The driver turned around and said, man, that's over 300 miles northeast of here. So Ellington got out of the cab and was able to charter a small plane.
Really?
And flew into Greenville, North Carolina.
Oh, wow.
And I'm sure that he probably spent about as much money on his air flight on the chartered plane as we paid him for the concert. But anyway, the show went on, and we had a great concert.
What a great story.
Another time, we had the great pianist Arthur Rubinstein.
Wow.
He was considered the world's greatest pianist at the time we presented him. And my office at that time was in Wright Auditorium. And the afternoon of the concert, mid-afternoon, in walked through the door to my secretary's office, and I could see from my office Mr. Rubinstein. I jumped up from my desk and went out to meet him and welcome him. And after we passed the pleasantries, he asked me a question. He said, and how are ticket sales for tonight's concert? I said, why, Mr. Rubinstein, your concert has been sold out for over 2 weeks. And he gave him a big smile and he said, well, it will be perfectly all right to put some seats on the stage. And then there was a little smile. He said, preferably for young ladies. So after we finished our little chat, he went on to the stage in the auditorium to check the piano. And I went back in my office and called the Dean of the School of Music and relayed what Mr. Rubinstein had said. And I said, I want you to get me 20 of the best looking young ladies in the School of Music, and I'm going to put them on the stage for tonight's concert. Well, we did it. And I very carefully watched Mr. Rubinstein all during the performance, and I really got a chuckle. Every now and then he would look over at those good-looking young ladies and smile, and he played magnificently. It was a terrific concert, and we took care of everything that way.
Wow.
I'll tell another story. A year or two after Van Cliburn won the Tchaikovsky competition in Moscow, we had Cliburn on our series. And it was my practice to take an artist out to dinner after the concert. Our budget was not great enough to take an orchestra, but for a solo artist or a small ensemble, we would do that. Well, I would always invite a couple of students and at least a faculty member from the committee to go along for dinner. Well, at that time, the best restaurant in town was the Beef Barn. So I arranged for us to go to dinner at the Beef Barn, and after the concert, that's where we went. And we got in the restaurant, and I made sure to seat this very attractive young lady, a little sorority girl, between myself and Clyburn and the others around the table. We all had steaks, and Clyburn went right ahead eating his, and he looked over at this young lady, and she was just picking at her steak. And he asked her, "Aren't you going to eat your steak?" And she kind of giggled, and she said, I ate before tonight's concert." He said, "And you're not going to eat it?" She said, I'm really not hungry." So he said, "Well, do you mind if I do?" She said no, so he, with his fork, pierced the steak, took it over on his plate, and he ate it. Well, the manager of the Beef Barn was very happy to have a man of Clyburn's stature dining with him, and he came over to our table and he said, "Mr. Clyburn, it is such an honor to have you dine with us at the Beef Barn tonight. I trust your steak met all your expectations." And Clyburn said, "Well, you know, I'm from Texas and I'm accustomed to great steaks, but I must tell you, I think that was the best one I ever had." The manager said, "May I cook you another?" Clyburn said, "I don't mind if you do." And I nearly fell out of my chair. The man ate practically 3 steaks.
Wow.
But that was our evening with Van Clyburn.
Wow.
So we had some wonderful times. In